Welcome back, and thank you for being here. After a long day, I hope this story gives you a few quiet minutes among the stars. Today, we follow Darian Cole, a former Earth soldier who only wanted a simple job on a distant mining world. But when he discovers workers trapped by debt, lies, and violence, one woman's final message forces him to choose between staying silent or making the whole galaxy hear the truth. If you enjoy stories about courage, justice, and humanity standing up when no one else will, please like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who might enjoy it. The first warning Darian Cole noticed on Veyrath was not an alarm. It was a line of workers standing outside a payroll window while armed guards watched them like cargo. Darian stood at the edge of the landing yard with a canvas bag over one shoulder and cold dust scraping against his boots. Veyrath was a mining planet on the outer rim of the trade lanes, far from Earth and far from the formal routes of the Galaxy Council. The sky above the yard was gray and low. The ground was dark blue stone, cut by rails, pipe towers, and freight crawlers moving tanks of compressed fuel toward waiting shuttles. He had come here as a contract mechanic for Carnvas extraction. His job sounded simple on paper. Repair pressure systems in the deep gas mines, finish the term, take the pay, and leave before anyone asked why a former Earth soldier had chosen a place where men disappeared into rock for 12 hours a shift. The foreman at the gate checked Darian's work license, then held out one broad hand. "Travel papers," the foreman said. Darian looked at him. "Why?" "Company keeps them safe until contract completion. Standard on Veyrath." Behind the foreman, a dozen workers waited with the same dull expression Darian knew too well. It was the look of people who had already learned that argument cost more than silence. Darian handed over the papers. He did it slowly, marking the cameras above the gate, the two guard by the cargo wall, and the emergency hatch half hidden behind frost pipes. Old habits rose in him like pain from a healed wound. Count exits. Count weapons. Count men who thought uniforms. Made them brave. He hated that the habits still worked. The contract camp lay below the mine ridge. It was a spread of metal dorms, ration halls, clinic boxes, and dead offices with warm light in the windows. To a tired worker arriving from orbit, it could almost look like shelter. Darian saw the locks first. The outer gates opened inward only. The medical building had bars on the supply hatch, and the payroll office had 2 guards for every clerk. A thin worker named Talon or walked beside him from intake to dorm block 7. Talon had gray skin, long hands, and the nervous speed of someone who had spent years apologizing before being blamed. "First term?" Talon asked. "On Veyrath, yes." "Then do not buy anything from the company store unless you are under debt to grow legs. They charge rent for the heater, filter fees for air, tool fees for tools they make you use, and a security fee for the guards who push you around. I have worked 6 months. My debt is higher than the day I arrived." Darian stopped at the door of the dorm. "Why not leave?" Talon gave a humorless laugh. "With what papers?" That answered more than the question. Inside the dorm, Darian found a narrow bunk, a locker, and a wall screen listing rules. No unauthorized assembly. No outside transmissions during shift cycles. No refusal of emergency production orders. Injury claims required supervisor validation. Absence without approval counted as contract breach. He set his bag down and sat on the bunk. For a moment, the room blurred into another room from another life, a military barracks under a red emergency sky. He saw his wife's last message waiting unanswered. He saw the official report that called the strike a targeting failure. He saw the small shoes recovered from the shelter entrance. Darian closed his eyes until the images passed. He had left the uniform because war had taken his family while he was away defending everyone else's. Since then, he had moved from station to station, job to job, never staying long enough to be known. Veyrath was supposed to be another empty place. A cold planet. A contract. A quiet exit. By the end of his first shift, he understood that Veyrath was not empty. It was full of people being slowly buried. The deep mine was built into the side of a black ridge 3 kilometers from camp. Workers rode down in lift cages, past layers of ice, stone, and old reinforcement ribs. At the lower levels, the air tasted metallic. The gas pockets beneath Veyrath were valuable because they could be refined into jump fuel stabilizer. Fleets, traders, and several council worlds depended on it, and most of them preferred not to ask how it was obtained. Darian's first assignment was a pressure leak in Branch 4. The supervisor called it minor. Darian heard the pipe singing before he saw it. A thin, high vibration moving through the service corridor like metal losing patience. A young worker had been ordered to tighten a manual coupling while the line remained active. His hands shook around the wrench. A guard stood behind him with a shock baton, bored and impatient. "Move," Darian said. The guard lifted his chin. He was assigned, then assign him to living. Darian stepped past him, reached the coupling, and put one hand against the valve housing. The rhythm was wrong. The main valve was not seated. If the young worker tightened the coupling, pressure would spike back through the line and blow the joint. A woman entered from the far end of the corridor, carrying a diagnostic slate under one arm. She had pale green-blue skin that caught the work lights with a faint silver sheen. Her hair was white with a violet tint, tied low behind her neck. Her eyes were amber, large and steady, with a thin ring of brightness near the iris. She looked almost delicate until she spoke. "Take your hand off that wrench," she told the young worker. The guard turned. "Liora, this is not your station. It is my pressure grid." She held up the slate. "And if he turns that coupling, Branch 4 loses the line, and everyone in this corridor gets buried under frozen vapor." Darian looked at her readings. She was right. "We need to bleed the line first," he said. Her eyes moved to his face, quick and assessing. "You know the system? I know pressure." Together they worked without wasting words. Liora rerouted the flow through a maintenance bypass. Darian cut the manual feed and braced the coupling before the trap pressure could jump. The young worker backed away, shaking. The guard muttered about delays, but he did not step closer once Darian looked at him. When the line settled, Liora wrote the fault into the maintenance log. "Do not blame SEF," she told the guard. "The valve housing failed before he touched it." The guard sneered. "You like making enemies. Only when they're already standing in the way." Darian almost smiled. After the shift, Liora found him outside the tool cage, wiping blue dust from his hands. "You were not trained by Karn Voss," she said. "No. Military." Darian folded the cloth. "A long time ago." She did not ask which war, which unit, or what he had done. That restraint mattered more than curiosity would have. "I am Liora Sen," she said. "Pressure inspector. Avlith by birth. Indentured by paperwork. Darian Cole. Mechanic. Human by birth. Tired by choice." This time she smiled, not brightly, but enough to change her whole face. "Then you will fit here," she said. "Most of us are tired by something." That evening she brought him to a table in the ration hall where Talon sat with 3 others. The food was thick root paste, mineral broth, and recycled protein cut into squares. Darian expected questions. Instead, Liora introduced everyone by job, not species. Talon repaired lift rails. Mirakael worked the clinic. SEF, the young worker from Branch 4, ran sensor lines. Each one had a DET number attached to their name in the company system. Liora sat across from Darian. "We do not ask new people what they are running from on the first meal. When do you ask? When they stop pretending they're not running." The answer should have pushed him away. Instead, it loosened something in his chest. Over the next weeks, Darian learned Veyrath by its small cruelties. Workers paid rent for beds they shared in rotation. The company charged for water filters, then fined workers when old filters made them sick. Injury reports disappeared unless a supervisor approved them. Pay was always coming next cycle. That was always due now. Liora fought the system with records. She copied faulty pressure logs, noted missing safety checks, and helped workers file claims even when everyone knew the claims would be denied. She was not naive. She simply refused to let the lie be clean. Darian tried to stay outside it. He fixed pumps, rewired panels, and slept badly. But Liora had a way of standing near his silence without crowding it. Sometimes after late shifts, they sat outside the dorms, watching refinery flames burn green against the gray sky. "I send half my pay home," she said one night. Or I would if they actually paid us. My mother thinks I am saving money. I have not told her the debt grows faster than my hours. Why not? Because hope is cheaper when it is far away. Darian looked at her then. There was no self-pity in her voice. Only fatigue and something stronger beneath it. I had a family, he said, before he could stop himself. Liora stayed still. They died during a strike that was not supposed to hit civilians. The report used careful words. Collateral mapping error. Unconfirmed shelter movement. Acceptable uncertainty. They had phrases for everything except the room I came home to. The wind moved dust across the yard. Liora said, I am sorry. Darian expected the words to feel useless. Somehow from her they did not. He did not fall in love all at once. It came through small things. Liora leaving a cup of hot broth near his workstation during a long repair. Darian adjusting the heater in her dorm block without telling her. Then came his own surprise. He realized he was listening for her footsteps before every shift. For the first time in years, Darian began to imagine a future that was not just an exit. That was when the mind began to fail. The first real sign came in Deep Branch 12, where the gas pockets ran under old stone layers. Darian was sent there to inspect a main pressure cluster after a series of false readings. Liora joined him because the cluster fed 3 active extraction chambers. Talon came to repair rail power, and Mira followed with a medical kit after 2 workers reported dizziness from vent leaks. Together, they moved deeper into Branch 12, where the air grew hotter and the walls seemed to breathe with pressure. The cluster room was hot despite the cold planet above. Pipes crossed the walls like ribs. The central valve assembly shook in tiny pulses Darian could feel through the floor. He knelt beside the housing and ran a scanner over the seal. The numbers came back wrong. This valve should have been replaced last year, he said. Liora checked the maintenance archive. It was marked replaced. It was painted. Darian scraped the edge of the housing with a tool. Old metal showed beneath fresh coating. Someone signed off on a repair that never happened, he said. Talon swallowed. Can it hold? Darian looked at the pressure trend. Not if they keep increasing output. Liora's jaw tightened. The next shipment window opens in 3 days. They will increase output. They wrote the report together. Darian used clear language, no drama. Main valve assembly in Branch 12 unfit for production. Continued extraction risks cascade, rupture, and chamber collapse. Immediate shutdown required. Liora signed as pressure inspector. Talon signed as rail technician. Mira signed as medical officer, adding that Vince's sickness had already begun. 3 other workers added names after Darian explained the risk in plain words. The report went to Supervisor Harn, then to Director Malrek Voss. Malrek summoned them to the operations floor the next morning. He was taller than Darian expected, with polished black horns sweeping back from a narrow skull and a suit too fine for a mine. His office overlooked the refinery yard through armored glass. Freight shuttles rose in the distance, carrying Veyrath's fuel into the trade lanes. Malrek did not offer seats. Your report is disruptive, he said. Darian kept his voice even. The valve will not survive another pressure increase. Our engineers disagree. Then your engineers did not open the housing. Malrek's eyes moved to Liora. Inspector Sun, you understand that false safety alarms reduce worker confidence. False safety does more damage, Liora said. A small silence followed. Malrek smiled without warmth. Your concern is noted. Branch 12 will remain active under reduced risk classification. The shipment schedule stands. People will die, Darian said. Malrek looked at him as if he had mentioned rain. People sign contracts. Outside the office, Liora's hands were trembling. Not from fear, Darian realized. From anger. We go to the district's safety office, she said. They did. Governor San Corps' administration sent a safety delegate in a clean coat who spent 11 minutes in Branch 12, never touched the valve, and declared the operation acceptable. Darian watched the delegate leave the mine. The vehicle did not turn toward the government compound. It turned toward Malrek's private residence on the ridge. That evening, Mira brought Darian a copied clinic file. 12 workers had been treated for pressure sickness in 2 weeks. The official record listed them as dehydration cases. They changed the codes after we submit them, Mira said. I kept copies. I did not know who to trust with them. Darian looked across the ration hall at Liora, who was helping SEF read a wage statement he could not understand. For years, Darian had avoided responsibility because responsibility had once led him home too late. But Veyrath did not let a man remain neutral. It placed suffering in front of him and waited to see what he would call it. Give me everything, he told Mira. Copies only. Keep the originals hidden. The shipment window opened 2 days later. Branch 12 was ordered to maximum output. The order came at the start of night shift. Workers gathered in the staging bay while alarms flickered amber above the lift cages. Supervisor Harn read the production directive from a company slate. No one was allowed to refuse emergency output. Refusal would count as contract breach, debt forfeiture, and loss of travel status. Liora stepped forward. The valve report is still active. Harn did not look at her. The report was resolved. By whom? By people above your pay grade. Darian caught Liora's arm before she could say more. Not to silence her. To steady the moment. Every guard in the bay had turned toward them. We document, he said softly. Then we move people out if it starts to go. Her eyes held his. And if it goes too fast. He had no answer that would not be a lie. 2 hours later, the deep mine changed its sound. At first it was only a low groan, too deep for alarms. Darian heard it through his boots. He was in a side corridor, replacing a relay when the pressure gauge on his wrist spiked red. Liora, he called over the comm, where are you? Branch 12, lower manifold. We're seeing backflow. Get out now. There are 6 workers below us. I'm pulling them up. The mine screamed. The main valve ruptured with enough force to throw Darian against the wall. Lights died. Emergency strips flashed red through dust and vapor. Somewhere below, metal tore like a ship hull opening to vacuum. Darian forced himself up. The old part of him took command before fear could. He pulled Talon from under a fallen rail brace, slapped a seal patch over a bleeding pressure line, and dragged 2 stunned workers toward the lift shaft. The corridor behind them filled with freezing vapor that glittered under the emergency lights. Liora, he said in the comm, status. Static answered. Then her voice came through, broken. I have SEF and 2 others. Lower path collapsed. Trying service crawl. Hold position. I am coming. No. The upper line is cracking. Darian, listen. He ran anyway. The service corridor into Branch 12 was half crushed. Darian crawled through a gap between twisted supports, heat on one side and cold vapor on the other. He found SEF first, coughing and unable to stand. Then he found 2 more workers, both alive. He pushed them toward Talon, who had returned despite shaking so hard he could barely hold a lamp. Take them up, Darian ordered. Liora is still below. Take them up. Talon obeyed because Darian's voice left no room for panic. Darian reached the lower bend as another support collapsed. A wall of broken metal blocked the crawl space. Through a narrow split, he saw Liora on the far side. Dust streaked her face. Her hair had come loose, white and violet against the red emergency glow. She was pinned by a fallen frame, one hand wrapped around a data core from the pressure console. For one impossible second, Darian believed he could move the frame. He braced his shoulder against it and pushed until pain flashed across his ribs. It did not move. Darian, Liora said, "Stop. No. The second line is going. You have minutes." He tried again. The frame held. Liora pressed the data core through the split. He could barely reach it. Their fingers touched around the metal. "It has the report," she said. "The order. The wage files. Malrek's voice. Myra's clinic codes. All of it. You will carry it out yourself." Her smile was small and terribly calm. "Do not make my last work harder." The second line buckled somewhere above them. Dust poured from the ceiling. Darian gripped the core. "Liora, do not let them write our deaths for us." The support wall fell between them. Darian did not remember leaving Branch 12. Later, Talon told him he came out carrying the data core in one hand and SEF over his shoulder, with frost burns on his coat and blood on his face. The surviving workers were brought to the surface before dawn. Company guards counted them like inventory while rescue crews moved too slowly below. Malrek's office released its first statement before the last bodies had been recovered. The console displayed a statement that said unauthorized worker action caused pressure failure in Branch 12. Karn Voss Extraction mourned the loss of valued contract personnel. Compensation would be subject to liability review. Darian read the statement on a camp screen, while Liora's name scrolled beneath the word personnel. The data core in his pocket felt heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. He could have gone to the mine that night. He could have broken Malrek's door with a cutter and made grief simple. Instead, he waited until morning and took the legal road first, because Liora had believed in records. He had also spent years fearing the man he became when law failed. If he crossed that line too soon, Malrek would use his rage to bury her. At the company office, Darian placed a copy of the data core on the claims desk. Independent investigation, he said. Full wages paid to every family. Public correction of the accident report. The clerk did not touch the core. 2 guards stood behind her. All claims must be submitted through supervisor validation. The supervisors are in the evidence. Then the claim cannot proceed. At the district authority building, Governor Sankor's officers made him wait 5 hours under camera. Kor was a heavy, silver-skinned politician with ceremonial bands on his wrists and a voice trained to sound patient. Mr. Cole, Kor said from behind a desk of polished stone, Veyrath respects all lawful grievances. But your behavior after the accident has caused concern. Darian stared at him. I brought evidence. You brought stolen company property. People died, and that tragedy is being handled by the appropriate authority. You are the authority. Kor's expression did not change. Exactly. That was when Darian understood that the governor was not failing to see the truth. He was standing between it and daylight. 2 days later, Karn Voss released its final incident report. Liora Sen and 3 others were named as responsible for violating extraction procedure. Their unpaid wages were seized against equipment damage. Families would receive no compensation until debt review ended. The report included Liora's contract signature under a clause accepting hazardous work risk. Talon broke down in the ration hall when he saw it. Mira stood beside him, white-faced, unable to speak. Darian walked to Malrek's tower before the shift bell. Malrek received him because powerful men sometimes enjoy watching grief ask permission. You have become troublesome, Malrek said. Darian placed a printed copy of the report on the desk. Remove their names from this lie. Pay what you owe. Open Branch 12 to outside inspectors. Malrek leaned back. You still think this is a moral dispute? It is not. It is a cost dispute. A living witness is expensive. A dead worker is paperwork. Darian's hand curled slowly. Malrek noticed and smiled. There it is. The Earth veteran. We checked your file. Wife and child lost in a border strike. Yes? Men like you always pretend to want peace until the old animal wakes up. Hit me, Mr. Cole. Give me a cleaner story. Darian did not move. Malrek slid Liora's contract across the desk. She signed. She accepted risk. She died owing this company more than she earned. That is the legal shape of her life. For a moment, Darian heard nothing but his own breathing. Then he saw the date beside one of the contract attachments. It had been amended 1 hour before the accident, while Liora was already in Branch 12. The signature was copied from an older document. Malrek had not only lied after the accident. He had prepared the lie while the workers were still alive. Darian looked up. Malrek's smile faded slightly. Thank you, Darian said. For what? Showing me which door to open. He turned to leave. The guards outside the office were waiting. They beat him in the corridor, not with wild rage, but with professional efficiency. One took the data copy from his coat. Another drove a baton into his ribs hard enough to drop him. They dragged him through the service entrance and threw him outside the perimeter gate, where camp workers could see but not help. By evening, local media screens called him a disturbed former soldier from Earth who had threatened a licensed Veyrath executive. Governor Kor's office announced a review of foreign contract worker agitation. The phrase made Darian almost laugh. Foreign agitation. That was what they called grief when it refused to kneel. He returned to the dorm after dark. Liora's bunk had been sealed with a company notice. Property held against outstanding debt. Her spare coat, her worn pressure gloves, and the little tin of bitter tea she liked after shifts were all locked behind a plastic strip. Darian stood there a long time. Then he went to his own locker and opened the false bottom of his travel bag. He had not brought military weapons to Veyrath. He had meant that part of his life to stay buried. But soldiers learn to carry tools that can become answers when law becomes theater. A compact signal scrambler, a field repair blade, a mining suit frame he had rebuilt stronger than required, a legal sidearm with limited charge, a spool of smart cable. There were also old identification codes from an Earth combat engineering unit that no longer existed in official systems, but still opened certain machines that remembered the war. Darian laid each item on the bunk with care. He was not going to kill his way through a mine. That was the story Malrek wanted. He was going to take the records. He was going to free anyone they had hidden. He was going to make Malrek open his own vault. And if Veyrath wanted to call Truth an attack, then Truth would arrive wearing his fingerprints. Before leaving, he recorded one message. Commander Jonah Rake, he said, using a contact he had not touched in 7 years. This is Darian Cole. I am sending a dead man packet through an old relay if I can reach it. Do not come for me unless the data proves what I think it proves. He paused. If it does, do not let Earth apologize for me before you see what they built here. I tried peace first. Then he went back to the mine. Karn Voss chose the third night after the accident to erase Branch 12 from the system. Darian knew because Malrek's tower had ordered all maintenance crews away from the central archive under the excuse of contamination review. Companies did not hide evidence during daylight when workers were watching. They did it under procedural language, after grief had been counted and locked away. A cold rain fell across the yard, thin and oily under refinery lights. Darian crossed through an old drainage channel beneath the east fence, moving slowly to avoid vibration sensors. The mining suit frame under his coat strengthened his legs without making him look armored. Inside the mine, he reminded himself why he had returned. Not to punish every guard. Not to make the dead feel answer by violence. He was here for records, witnesses, and the truth Liora had died protecting. At the first security door, he looped smart cable around the manual lock and fed it a false maintenance signal. At the second, he jammed the camera for 8 seconds, crossed beneath it, and restored the feed so the guard room would see an empty corridor. 2 armed guards rounded the corner near the tool cage. Darian stepped from shadow, broke the first guard's bat in hand, struck the second behind the knee, and used a sleep patch from Myra's clinic kit to drop them without lasting harm. He took their key tags and left their weapons locked in a storage crate. The central archive sat below the operations tower. Darian reached the archive door just as 3 technicians inside began purging Branch 12 logs. He sealed the room from outside and routed the purge into a dead storage loop. On the glass panel, 1 technician shouted for security. Darian held up his sidearm, then pointed it at the floor. Sit down, he said through the intercom. Do not touch the consoles. You're not my target. They sat. He entered through the maintenance hatch and copied the archive onto 3 drives. Wage files, debt ledgers, medical reclassifications, safety reports marked resolved by officials who had never entered the mine. He also found payment records routed through shell offices linked to Governor Corps' administration. It was worse than he expected. Veyrath was not a dirty mine. It was a machine built to turn people into debt until their deaths became accounting events. A hidden directory caught his eye. Detention compliance. Darian opened it. Names filled the screen. Not fired. Not transferred. Held. Contract breach containment. Labor risk isolation. Coordinates pointed to the old maintenance level beneath Branch 8. Darian stared at the list, and the night changed shape. Liora had not died over one unsafe valve. She had found the edge of something larger, and every door Darian opened proved she had been right. He copied the list and moved. The maintenance level smelled of rust, old coolant, and bodies kept too long in bad air. The cells were converted storage rooms with magnetic locks. Inside them were workers Darian had heard mentioned as deserters, thieves, or off-world transfers. Some were too weak to stand. Others pressed toward the doors, as if afraid hope might leave if they blinked. Liora Sen was in the third cell, one eye bruised, clinic jacket torn at the sleeve. "Darian," she whispered, "can you walk?" "Yes." "Others cannot." He opened the locks row by row. Talon appeared from a side corridor, with 2 freed workers behind him, face pale but determined. "I followed you," Talon said before Darian could scold him. "If you're angry, be angry after we get them out." Darian gave him a key tag. "Take them through the old rail tunnel. No lights unless needed." "Liora, get names. Short statements. Who held you, why, how long?" Liora nodded. Even hurt, she became a clinic officer again. She moved from prisoner to prisoner, recording voices on a stolen slate. One old miner gripped Darian's sleeve. "Are you Earth military?" "Not anymore." "Then why are you here?" Darian looked down the corridor toward the tower above them. "Because they counted on that." By the time security realized the detention level was open, the first group of workers had already reached the rail tunnel. Darian stayed behind to slow pursuit, because the evidence meant nothing if the hidden witnesses vanished again. He cut a support crane loose across the corridor, jammed 2 doors, and used the mine's own warning system to flood Branch 8 with evacuation alarms. Guards ran toward false breaches while freed workers moved away from the real danger. Malrek's voice came over the mine speakers. "Mr. Cole, you have made your point. Surrender, and I will consider asking Governor Core for restraint." Darian kept walking toward the operations tower. "You should have offered restraint before Branch 12, he said, though he knew Malrek could not hear. He had to stay cold now. If he let anger lead, Malrek would get the violent Earth veteran he wanted. The tower lobby was armored against worker riots, not against a combat engineer who had spent years opening bunkers under fire. Darian overloaded the door motors, stepped through smoke, and disabled the guard station with 2 thrown shock charges. A guard fired at him. The round hit his suit frame and knocked him back against the wall. Darian answered with a shot into the floor at the guard's feet, close enough to stop him, not enough to kill. "Down," Darian said. The guard dropped. Malrek was in the executive archive, trying to transfer private files to an off-world server. Darian entered behind him and shut the door. Malrek turned, face gray under the lights. "You are proving every accusation." "Good," Darian said. "Then record this part too." He forced Malrek to the main console and opened a live internal capture. Malrek tried 3 false passwords before Darian pressed the field blade against the console edge, not his throat. "The next thing I cut is the server's cooling line," Darian said. "If it melts, your private accounts melt with it." Malrek gave the correct access. The vault opened. There were more files than Darian could process. Contracts altered after injuries. Death classifications changed to debt closures. Communications with Governor Core. Lists of workers from council member species hidden under Veyrath labor codes. There were also messages discussing the public value of blaming a human veteran if violence occurred. Malrek had planned to make Darian the monster before Darian ever came back. Darian connected the transmitter and began sending the files through the old Earth relay code. The signal was weak, broken by Veyrath's filters, but enough fragments pushed upward. Malrek watched the progress bar. "You think Earth will come for a discharged man in a mining dispute?" Darian did not look at him. "No." "Then why send it?" "Because Earth will come for evidence." The door exploded inward. Veyrath security forces entered in black armor, weapons leveled. Governor Sen Core stood behind them on a remote projection, his silver face enlarged and calm. "Darian Cole," Core said, "you are under arrest for terrorism, unlawful seizure of civil facility, kidnapping, and assault against Veyrath officers." Darian grabbed Malrek and pulled him into view of the recording lens. "Say it." Branch 12 was unsafe. "You knew." Malrek's eyes darted to Core. Core's voice hardened. "End him." The first stun round hit Darian in the side. The suit frame absorbed part of it, but the second struck his neck. His muscles locked. He fell, still reaching for the transmitter. The last thing he saw before the floor rose to meet him was the progress bar blinking at 37% sent. Not enough, he thought. Then he saw Liora's hand pushing the data core through broken metal. Enough to start. Veyrath's official story traveled faster than Darian's broken signal. By morning, every public screen on the planet showed a still image of him in Malrek's tower, armed and surrounded by smoke. Governor Core addressed the system in a blue ceremonial coat, calling the attack a foreign act of destabilization by a traumatized human veteran. He praised Karn Voss extraction for restraint. He announced that Darian Cole would be held under emergency security law until Veyrath completed its investigation. In the underground detention wing beneath the governor's security compound, Darian heard pieces of the broadcast through a wall speaker. His wrists were fixed to a chair. His ribs burned when he breathed. One eye had swollen nearly shut. They had asked him for transmission codes, names of Earth contacts, and proof that Earth Command had ordered the attack. He gave them nothing because there was nothing to give. The interrogator slapped a folder down in front of him. You will sign that you acted under Earth military influence. Darian read the first line through blurred vision. It claimed he had acted with covert support from Earthward military elements. He almost smiled. Bad grammar, he said. The interrogator struck him again. They were careful not to leave marks that would show from a distance. They were less careful with pain. Hours blurred. Darian held himself together by counting. Breath. Light flicker. Door hinge. Guard steps. Not escape planning. Not yet. Just proof that his mind still belonged to him. When he nearly drifted, he heard Liora's voice in memory. Do not let them write our deaths for us. He opened his eyes. Far above Veyrath, a broken packet reached an old military relay near the edge of Earth-protected space. Most of the transmission was corrupted. The relay almost discarded it as ghost traffic until an identity shard matched a retired combat engineering code linked to Darian Cole. The packet routed to Commander Jonah Rake aboard the patrol carrier Resolute Dawn. Jonah was in a fleet readiness meeting when the alert reached his private channel. He had aged since Darian last saw him. His hair had gone iron gray at the temples, and his uniform carried the clean weight of command. But when Darian's name appeared, the room around him seemed to go silent. Jonah opened the packet. Static. Liora's voice, broken but clear enough. Do not let them write our deaths for us. A pressure report. A wage ledger. A flash of workers behind cell doors. Malrek's voice saying a dead worker is paperwork. Then Darian appeared on the floor of the tower, reaching for a transmitter as Veyrath troops moved in. Jonah watched it twice. His operations officer said, Sir. Jonah closed the file. Send a formal demand to Veyrath. Immediate consular access to Earth citizen Darian Cole. Preservation order for Karn Voss extraction records. Medical verification by neutral observers. And if they refuse? Jonah looked at the frozen image of Darian being dragged away. He remembered another day, years before, when Darian had stood in the ruins of an Earth border town holding a burned toy in both hands. Jonah had been the officer who told him the strike had been a mistake. He had also signed the discharge papers when Darian said he could no longer wear the uniform without hearing his family's last message in every alarm. Record their refusal, Jonas said. Then wake the fleet. Veyrath refused within the hour. Governor Core's reply was polished, legal, and insulting. Darian Cole was subject to local jurisdiction. Any Earth attempt to interfere would be treated as hostile pressure against an independent world. Veyrath would petition the Galactic Council for protection against human military intimidation. Jonah forwarded the refusal to Earth Command, along with the evidence packet. He did not ask for permission to feel anger. Commanders could not afford feelings as policy. But Earth law allowed emergency intervention when a citizen was denied consular access, when evidence suggested unlawful detention, and when local authority was actively destroying proof of crimes involving multiple species. Authorization came back in 7 minutes. Earthward Shield fleet changed course. Veyrath saw them arrive as a line of new stars burning into orbit. The fleet did not fire first. It did not need to. Earth ships took positions above the main defense grid and unfolded silent arrays that turned Veyrath's targeting systems blind. Orbital cannons lost fire control. Military transmitters looped back their own commands. Customs cutters attempting to leave with Karn Voss data archives found their engines locked by remote safety overrides. Every armed base linked to Governor Core's security network went dark without a civilian district losing power. On the governor's emergency channel, an admiral from Veyrath demanded to know if Earth was declaring war. Jonah appeared on the screen from the bridge of Resolute Dawn. "No," he said. "We are here to collect what your law tried to bury. Core threatened council sanctions." Jonah listened. Then he said, "You denied consular access to an Earth citizen. You concealed evidence of forced labor. You attempted to move corporate archives off-world during an active inquiry." He leaned closer to the screen. "You have 30 minutes to open the detention facility. At 31, we open it without your cooperation." Core did not open it. At 31 minutes, Earth Marines landed outside the security compound. They moved with the terrible discipline of people trained to end violence quickly. Gate weapons were disabled. Guard vehicles stopped with their engines dead. Doors opened under breaching charges placed to avoid the cells beyond them. Veyrath troops fired once from the inner barricade. Earth responded with shock rounds and light suppression. The fight lasted 4 minutes. Jonah entered the detention wing himself. He found Darian in the third room, still tied to the chair, head lowered. For a second, Jonah saw the old soldier he had known. Then he saw the thinner man who had tried so hard not to become that soldier again. "Darian," Jonah said. Darian lifted his head with effort. Recognition moved slowly through pain. "You came," he rasped. Jonah cut the restraints. "You left the uniform. You did not leave Earth." Darian tried to stand and failed. Jonah caught him. "I did not want a war," Darian said. Jonah looked through the open door at the Veyrath officers being disarmed in the corridor. "Then they should not have built one around you. The rescue should have ended the matter. Instead, it pulled Veyrath's lies into the one place Governor Core thought he understood better than humans did." The Galactic Council convened an emergency tribunal at the central chamber of Orzen Ring, a diplomatic station built around a blue-white star. Veyrath filed the complaint. The charge was simple enough for every world to understand. Veyrath said Earth had violated its sovereignty and used military force to take a prisoner from local custody. Earth did not deny that its fleet had entered Veyrath space. Earth answered by showing why the rescue became necessary. Core expected sympathy. Many council members feared Earthward Shield Fleet's action, not because it was reckless, but because it had been precise. A reckless fleet could be condemned. A precise one raised harder questions. Earth sent Ambassador Mara Ven. Mara was not loud, not theatrical, and not easily baited. She had once served as legal counsel for reconstruction zones after the border wars. She had read the first casualty list from Darian's hometown. She knew the cost of human anger and the value of keeping it shaped like law. Darian attended the tribunal as a witness, seated beside Jonah and a medical officer. He was bruised, tired, and still recovering. He hated the chamber immediately. Too much polished stone. Too many elevated seats. Too many beings speaking about suffering as if distance made it balanced. Before the tribunal opened, Mara asked to see Darian alone in a quiet preparation room beneath the chamber. The walls were plain white, the chairs too narrow, and the table between them held a pitcher of water Darian had not touched. Through the glass beyond the door, he could see aides moving with stacks of legal tablets and translation bands. Everyone looked busy. Everyone looked clean. After Veyrath, cleanliness felt suspicious. Mara sat across from him and did not ask if he was ready. That was one reason Darian trusted her more than he expected. "Governor Core will try to make the entire case about your break-in," she said. "He will not defend the mine. He will defend procedure. He will say that if Earth can rescue me, then Earth can rescue anyone it finds inconvenient." "He is not wrong to fear that argument," Mara said. "That is why we answer with sequence. First, the hazard was reported. Second, the report was buried. Third, workers died. Fourth, evidence was seized." She counted the points calmly. "Fifth, local remedy was denied. Sixth, you were detained and consular access was refused. Earth moved after that chain was complete. Not before." Darian looked at his hands. The swelling had gone down, but cuts still crossed his knuckles. "And my part in the tower?" he asked. "You tell the truth. You do not decorate it. You do not apologize for things you did not do. You do acknowledge the things you did." Mara's voice stayed quiet. "The council is used to liars. A damaged, honest man will trouble them more than a perfect speech." He gave a tired breath. "I'm not sure I have much speech left." "Good. Then spend it carefully." Jonah entered a few minutes later with a small object wrapped in a cloth. He set on the table. Darian opened it and found Liora's pressure inspector badge. The surface was scratched, and the company mark had been burned away by heat. But her name remained clear. "Talon recovered it from Branch 12, Jonas said. He asked that you carry it if you can." Darian closed his fingers around the badge. For a moment, the tribunal, the council, Earth, Veyrath, all of it fell away. There was only a woman in red emergency light pushing a data core through broken metal. "They will try to reduce her to a clause in a contract," Mara said softly. "Do not let them. But do not let grief make the argument for you. Let the record do that." Darian nodded. In the main chamber, Veyrath's delegation had already begun shaping the room before the first word was spoken. Their aides distributed summaries calling Branch 12 a tragic internal incident. They displayed still frames of Darian armed in the tower, carefully cropped so the freed prisoners and purge consoles were invisible. Several smaller worlds watched with visible unease. They had their own minds, their own debts, and their own quiet arrangements with companies like Carnvas. If Earth won too broadly, many profitable habits would become dangerous. That was the pressure Mara had warned him about. This was not only Veyrath fighting to punish one man. It was a market fighting to keep its shadows. Mara did not distribute a counter-summary. She placed one black data core on the Earth table and waited. Darian recognized it as a restored copy of Liora's final file. Its presence was almost rude in its simplicity. When the doors opened to observers, freed workers from Veyrath entered under council protection. Talon was among them. Mira too. Some walked with canes. Some carried translation masks because long exposure in the mine had damaged their lungs. Their presence changed the shape of the audience. Veyrath had expected legal theory. Earth had brought the people theory had been used to erase. Governor Kor noticed them and whispered sharply to his aide. Malrek did not turn around. Darian saw all of it. He understood then that the hearing would not be clean. It would be a fight over what the room was allowed to see. High Arbiter Solon Mar opened the hearing. This tribunal will determine whether Earth exceeded lawful protection of its citizen and whether Veyrath's sovereignty was violated by military force. Governor Kor spoke first. He was smooth. He described Veyrath as a small, independent planet threatened by a powerful human fleet. He displayed images of Darian in Malrek's tower, armed, smoke around him. He called Darian unstable. He called Earth dangerous. He called Carnvas extraction a civilian company attacked during a lawful safety review. Malrek Voss sat behind him, bandaged for sympathy, though Darian knew none of the injuries were serious. Kor finished with his hand spread. If the Council permits Earth to invade any world where one human breaks local law, then no member is safe. Murmurs moved through the chamber. Motiv and Stut. Earth agrees, she said. The murmurs stopped. No world should be invaded because one human breaks local law. That is not what happened on Veyrath. She turned slightly, letting the chamber settle. Veyrath has accused Earth of invading. Earth will answer by showing the chain that made the rescue necessary. Kor's expression tightened for the first time. Mara continued. Before Earth moved, a mine hazard was reported and buried. Workers died. Evidence was seized. Travel papers were held. Workers were confined underground. Darian Cole was denied consular access after sending evidence that Veyrath officials were destroying records. She touched the console. Earth will show those facts one by one, not as theory, as evidence. That was the first turn. Kor tried to recover by calling the detention level an emergency holding site for violent labor agitators. He said Veyrath had faced sabotage before. He said harsh conditions on a frontier planet could be mistaken for abuse by outsiders who did not understand local law. Mara let him finish. Then she asked the chamber to display the detention records beside the mine wage ledgers. The same workers listed as absent deserters were listed in another ledger as active debt assets. The company had continued charging them rent, air fees, and security fees while they were locked underground. One man had been billed for meals during a week when Myra's medical record showed him unconscious from untreated lung damage. "This is not frontier confusion," Mara said. "This is arithmetic." A delegate from the Thalen Compact objected that Earth was turning a sovereignty case into a labor audit. Mara answered by opening the nationality tags hidden inside the Karnvas payroll system. Thalen names appeared on the list. So did names from 6 other council jurisdictions. The Thalen delegate sat back without another word. High Arbiter Solon Mar asked Governor Kor whether Veyrath had notified those worlds that their citizens were in contract confinement. Kor said the records were incomplete. Mara displayed signed transfer receipts from Kor's own labor ministry. The chamber grew colder, not in temperature, but in attention. Darian felt it from his seat. The council was no longer listening to a human rescue case. It was listening to the sound of a hidden economy opening under its feet. Malrek requested permission to speak. He claimed Karnvas had provided opportunity to poor migrants who otherwise had no work. He said debt contracts were voluntary, risk clauses were legal, and production deadlines were necessary to keep trade lanes supplied. Darian watched him talk about opportunity while Talon stared at the floor. Mara asked only one question. "Director Voss, if the contracts were voluntary, why did your company hold travel papers after workers asked to leave?" Malrek said workers often misplaced documents. Mara played a security recording from the intake office. A foreman collected papers from arriving workers and placed them in a vault marked Restricted Employee Mobility. The phrase appeared on the chamber display in every translation system. Restricted Employee Mobility. Even some delegates who had avoided looking at the freed workers now looked up. Mara did not raise her voice. That is what Karnvas called a locked door when it wanted the door to sound legal. The second turn came when Darian testified. He did not try to sound heroic. He told the tribunal where he had been, why he had come to Veyrath, what Branch 12 looked like, and how Liora had signed the pressure warning. He admitted he broke into Karnvas extraction. He admitted he used force against armed guards. He admitted he took company files. High Arbiter Solon Mar leaned forward. "Mr. Cole, do you deny that your actions endangered a civilian facility?" "No," Darian said. Kor's delegates stirred with satisfaction. Darian continued. "I deny that it was only a civilian facility. It had a hidden detention level. It had falsified medical records. It had wage ledgers for workers who were not allowed to leave." He looked toward the freed workers before he finished. "If a building keeps prisoners, destroys evidence, and operates under armed protection from the government, then calling it civilian does not make it innocent." The chamber quieted. Mara played Leora's final transmission next. No one interrupted. The sound quality was poor. Static cut through every few words. But the meaning survived. Leora's voice named the report, the production order, the wage files, and Malrek's instruction to keep Branch 12 active. "Do not let them write our deaths for us." Even translated through chamber audio, the line changed the air. Mara then displayed the report Darian and Liora had filed before the accident. It bore timestamps, signatures, and a routing trail to Malrek's office. She displayed the governor's safety delegate clearing the branch without inspection. She displayed private transfers from Karnvas to accounts tied to Kor's security ministry. She displayed Mira Kale's clinic records, the originals beside the altered versions. Mira testified remotely from an Earth medical ship above Veyrath. Talon spoke after her, voice shaking but clear. Freed workers from the detention level added names, dates, and contract numbers. One was from a council member world that had publicly supported Veyrath that morning. Its delegate lowered his eyes when a worker described being held for trying to send a message home. Malrek tried to claim the files were forged. Mara had expected that. She brought in the archive technicians Darian had locked in the purge room. Under council immunity, they admitted the purge order came from Malrek. One said the Branch 12 deletion had been scheduled before Darian's break-in. That was the third turn. The final turn belonged to Earth. Mara stood in the center of the chamber while the evidence hung above her in layered displays. Not a speech of outrage. Not a plea. A record. Veyrath asked this council to punish Earth for entering its airspace, she said. Earth asks why Veyrath needed an airspace shield around a prison built under a mine. She let that question settle before continuing. Veyrath asks this council to condemn a rescue. Earth asks why a rescue became necessary after lawful consular access was refused. Core rose. This is economic blackmail. Mara looked at him. No, Governor. This is notice. She touched the console. A map of trade lanes appeared. Several routes glowed blue, each one passing through Earth-protected stabilizer corridors. Veyrath's fuel exports depended on them. So did several corporations linked to Karnvas. If this council declares Veyrath's actions lawful, humanity will suspend extraction transit privileges for companies using debt confinement labor. We will publish the archive. We will open asylum processing for trapped workers. Her voice remained controlled. We will require independent labor certification for every shipment through Earth corridors. That is not war. That is our right not to carry stolen lives through our space. For the first time, the chamber did not look at Darian as the danger. It looked at Veyrath. High Arbiter Solon called a recess. Delegates who had arrived ready to scold Earth now demanded private access to the victim lists. Worlds that had ignored Veyrath's labor camps discovered their own citizens in Karnvas files. Trade representatives began calculating what would happen if Earth closed its corridors. The answer spread through the chamber faster than any speech. Core had brought Earth to the Council to isolate it. He had given humanity a stage. When the tribunal returned, the ruling was not gentle. Karnvas extraction was placed under emergency seizure pending prosecution. Malrek Voss was remanded to council custody for industrial manslaughter, unlawful confinement, evidence destruction, and conspiracy. Governor Sankor was suspended from authority and referred to a special inquiry for corruption and illegal detention. Veyrath's mines were placed under independent labor supervision. Wages owed to workers and families of the dead would be paid from frozen corporate accounts. All travel papers held by Karnvas were to be returned within one local day. The council stopped short of praising Earth. Councils rarely praised anyone unless forced. But it recognized that Earth had acted after lawful access was denied and after credible evidence of ongoing harm existed. It ordered a review of intervention standards for labor detention cases. That was enough. Darian listened without triumph. Each ruling landed like stone in water. Necessary. Heavy. Too late for the names he cared about most. After the hearing, Malrek was led past him in restraints. For a moment, the director's eyes met Darian's. There was no clever line left in him. Darian did not speak either. He had wanted, once, to make Malrek afraid. Now he understood that fear was too small. The truth had done something worse to him. It had made him ordinary in front of everyone. Governor Core passed Underguard next, still trying to address delegates who no longer looked at him. Sovereignty had been his shield. He had held it over a pit full of workers and called the darkness lawful. Now the shield was evidence. Jonah found Darian near the observation glass, where Orison Ring's star filled half the sky. Earth Command wants to know whether you will come home, Jonah said. Darian watched council ships move like silver marks against the light. I do not know where that is anymore. Home does not have to be the place before the loss. Sometimes it is the place that still answers when your name is called. Darian looked at him. You practicing diplomacy now? Mara made me take notes. For the first time since Branch 12, Darian almost laughed. It hurt his ribs, but he let it happen. 3 weeks later, he returned to Veyrath under a protected civilian transport. The planet looked the same from orbit. Gray clouds, blue stone, refinery scars. But the gates of the contract camp stood open. Workers lined up at the payroll office, not to beg, but to collect what was owed. Council monitors stood beside Earth legal observers and representatives from several species whose citizens had been found in the files. Talon met Darian near the old rail yard. He looked thinner, but lighter somehow, as if someone had removed a weight from his back and he was still learning how to stand without it. "They returned my papers," Talon said. "I held them for an hour. Just held them. I had forgotten what my own freedom looked like." Mira had reopened the clinic under independent supervision. She was building a public registry of injuries and deaths the company had hidden. SEF was leaving Veyrath the next morning with compensation enough to go home. Darian walked past them all toward a new wall near the entrance to Branch 12. It was made from polished black stone cut from the mine itself. Names had been engraved in clean lines. Not personnel numbers. Not debt codes. Names. Liora Sen was near the center. Darian stood before it while the wind moved cold dust around his boots. For years, he had believed loss was a room that only got smaller. His family had died under a burning sky, and the official words had sealed them away where no one had to feel the shape of them. Liora had died under stone, and Karn Voss had tried to do the same. Paperwork over blood. Procedure over grief. Debt over names. This time, the names remained. Jonah and Mara stayed back, giving him space. Talon placed a small pressure gauge beneath Liora's name. Mira placed a strip of clinic cloth beside it. SEF left a tool charm from Branch 12. Darian took out the bitter tea tin from Liora's sealed bunk. The company had listed it as recoverable property. Someone from the worker committee had given it to him that morning. He sat at the base of the wall. For a long time he said nothing. Then he placed his hand against Liora's name. "They heard you," he said. The wind carried the words toward the open mine gate. Behind him, workers crossed the yard without guards turning them back. Above them, Earth ships remained in orbit, not as conquerors, but as a warning written in steel and silence. Before Darian left the memorial wall, a group of workers gathered near the open gate. No one gave a formal speech. They had heard enough official words to last several lifetimes. Instead, Talon read the names one by one, and after each name the workers answered with the same quiet sentence. Recorded and remembered. The sentence passed from voice to voice in many accents. Avlith, human, Thalen, Ruin, Keshri, and species Darian still could not name. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The old company speakers above the yard, once used to call shifts and threats, carried the names across the camp. When Liora's name came, Darian could not answer at first. The word caught behind his ribs. Mira reached over and touched his sleeve, not to comfort him away from grief, but to hold him steady inside it. Recorded and remembered, Darian said. A council monitor later told the workers that the registry would be copied to 3 public archives. One on Veyrath, one on Orzenring, and one inside an Earth quarter station. The company would never again be the only keeper of their history. That mattered to Darian more than any medal could have. Medals could be locked in drawers. Records, once freed, learned how to travel. Justice was not a clean ending. Some workers would go home. Some would stay and rebuild. Some would never stop hearing Branch 12 in their sleep. But the debt of Branch 12 had not been filed away as error, debt, or risk. Their names had reached the Galaxy Council. Their voices had changed law. When Darian Cole finally walked away from Veyrath, he did not leave as the man who had won a war. He left as a man who had carried too many names in silence and had finally forced the galaxy to hear them. Liora Sen was gone. The workers who died in the dark were gone. No verdict could bring them back. But their deaths were no longer paperwork. Their voices were no longer trapped under stone. And somewhere across the stars, every company, governor, and counselor who believed humanity could be pushed aside learned one simple truth. Earth may mourn its dead quietly, but it does not abandon its people, and does not let the galaxy bury the truth forever. If this story stayed with you, please leave a like, share it with someone who loves powerful sci-fi stories, and subscribe to the channel for more tales of humanity, courage, and the price of justice among the stars. Your support helps this channel keep growing, and it means more than you know. Thank you for listening. We will meet again in the next story.